Ralph Nader was interviewed by John Schwartz in The Intercept, and they can't. And it's a pretty profound interview. I highly suggest reading all of it, and I'll put the link in the show notes below, and I want to get into what Ralph Nader says. It's obviously a lot about what we've been talking about on this show and everywhere else. Is he says really the Democrats, they cannot defend the United States from, as he called it, the most vicious Republican Party in history. He says, if you took the Republican Party of today and put them and, put it next to Teddy Roosevelt, Dwight Eisenhower, they would be rolling in their graves. They would just be like, what? And this is what happens because the Democratic Party keeps moving to the center. They keep moving to the right. They then push the Republican Party way, way crazy right. And Nader says stuff that we've talked about, that Chris Hedges has talked about, which is if they ran a progressive platform, a populist policy, they would crush. It would be landslide after landslide. But what's important in this is a little bit on who Ralph Nader is, and then he goes into some milestones, basically, of where the Democratic Party, how they've got to where they're at today. So he, for those of you who don't know, Ralph Nader was, he did an expose of the car industry called Unsafe at Any Speed, and he basically had all these organizations, and he got a lot of traction. There was something wrong, he'd get people together, and he would go in there and petition Congress and the Senate, and a law would get passed, and change would happen. That's what he did. So I'll read a little bit from the article. He and his organizations collaborated with congressional Democrats to pass a flurry of landmark laws protecting the environment, consumers, and whistleblowers. Journalist William Greeter described him as one of America's 3 top models for small D democratic activism, together with Saul Alinsky and Martin Luther King Jr. Meanwhile, the 1971 Powell Memo, which laid the groundwork for resurgence of the corporate right, named him a key enemy of the system. This is back in 1971, calling him the single most effective antagonist of American business. Right? And it talks about how since 2000, the Democratic Party doesn't want it. They blame him, right? Al Gore lost Florida by 537 votes. And Nader got 97,000 votes in Florida. A lot of people don't know this. There was people that were Republicans voted for Nader instead of Bush. People don't know that. There's also a comprehensive and little-known study that was released soon after 9/11 that found Gore would have won Florida if all disputed ballots had been recounted. But he didn't. He just acquiesced. He didn't say, no, I want to recount. All the disputed ballots, let's recount. I want to recount. He could have done that. He just finally quit. But we'll never know. We'll never know what really, what could have happened had Nader not run. Maybe Gore would have been crushed even harder. I don't know. Gore ran a shitty campaign. But so Schwartz asked Nader, I'm interested in the history of the Democrats caving. So he says, I'm going to give you milestones around the Democratic Party neck that are milestones. The first big one was 1979. Tony Coelho, who was a congressman from California and who ran the House Democratic campaign treasure chest, convinced the Democrats that they should bid for corporate money, corporate PACs, 1979. That they could raise a lot of money. Why leave it up to Republicans and simply rely on the dwindling labor union base for money when you had a huge honeypot in the corporate area? And what was the difference when they did this? They lost to Reagan. And then they started getting weaker in Congress. And in 1980, Reagan landslide against Carter, they lost Senator Gaylord Nelson, Senator Warren Magnuson, Senator Frank Church. We had more trouble getting congressional hearings investigating corporate malfeasance by the Democratic Congressional Committee chairs. When the Democrats regained the White House in 1992, you could see the difference in appointments to regulatory agencies, the difficulty in getting them to upgrade health and safety regulations. They went corporate. They went away from labor. They went away from working people. They went corporate. And what happened? Then they lost to the other thing, they didn't know how to deal with Reagan, right? So at that point, Democrats just considered Republicans to be a bunch of dull, stupid, and humorless. And they didn't know how to deal with nice Reagan who smiled and said all, did awful things, but he did it, as long as you're polite and nice and you can do awful things. So they had no resistance to Reagan. Then they started, according to Nader, judging who raised more money. That's how they started judging. Again, backing away from policy that's populist and progressive. Getting away from helping the masses, the working people. Going more corporate. So when they started to do this, they began to judge their challenge to Republicans by how much money they raised. You talk to Marcy Kaptur from Cleveland. She says, we go into the Democratic caucus in the House, we go into talking money, we stay talking money, and we go out with our quotas for money. It was all about you just got to raise more money. It wasn't about we have better policy, we have better stances on issues, we have better things for the people. It started in the 80s, them abandoning policy. And they started raising money from Wall Street and drug companies and health companies and all this other stuff. And so FDR said the Democratic Party is the party of working families. Republicans are the party of the rich. So then they flipped it themselves by going after all this corporate money, the Democrats. Yeah. And then that's when the Democratic Party started drawing back geographically to the coasts, the big cities. It used to be the party of the working people. It used to... Here's the second one. And that created another milestone. You don't run a 50-state presidential campaign. If you don't run a 50-state campaign, number one, you're strengthening the opposing party in those states you've abandoned. So they can take those states for granted and concentrate on states that they're in a gray area. That was a flub number one. That's what Hillary did. This blue wall. I didn't even have to campaign in blue states. So they started abandoning red states. They abandoned 5 states in the Rocky Mountain area and started out with a handicap of 9 or 10 senators. See? You start losing the House and the Senate when you abandon these states. And then the Republicans come in and just turn it into a red state. There was 2 senators from Montana that were Democrats. Senator Church from Idaho was a Democrat. Senator Frank Moss, great consumer champion, Democrat from Utah. Now there's almost nobody. The 2 senators from Wyoming are Republican. The 2 senators from Montana are Republican. The 2 senators are Utah Republican. I think the Democrats have 1 seat in Colorado. You go down to Arizona and it's 2 Republicans again. See what they did? So they never even had a veto-proof majority at their peak in the Senate. Couldn't even do it. That's how you get stuff done. Then they started to campaign on TV, and they're bringing in political consultants. So then, when they started doing that, when the labor unions started to get weak, they began shelling out. So then the labor unions started shelling out huge money to the Democrats for television, and then by doing that, they diverted funds from the grassroots mobilization on behalf of the Democrats, because that's what labor unions for. Democrat, as FDR said, it's the party of working people. So you get labor unions as grassroots. Instead, they put all their money on big TV campaigns. Instead of look what happened to Carrier in Indiana, right? That was a complete sham. Trump comes in, I'm saving jobs. He gives them a tax breaks, and 600 people still got handed pink slips. If you had a real Democratic Progressive Party, that union would be getting people converted over to the Democrat and to the progressive side of things, because that union would say, we got jobs. This is the party of the worker. So we're going to back this party. And again, as I've said, you give that person a job, you give them health care benefits, you give them a nice, decent life, good education. That guy's going to listen to equality. That guy's going to listen to gay marriage, maybe. Might do it. More open to it, at least. And that's when they started the process of message preceding policy. So they just kept saying how bad the Republicans are. They campaigned, the Republicans are bad, the Republicans are bad. Look, we're better, we're better, we're better. And what they should have been doing was saying, we'll get you, they should have been saying, we'll bring you full medical care. We're going to crack down on corporate crime against workers and consumers and the environment. Stealing, lying, cheating you. We're going to get you a living wage. We're going to get you a lean defense, a better defense, and get some of this money and start rebuilding your schools and bridges and water and sewage system and libraries and clinics. Instead, they just said, can you look, see how bad the Republicans are? Sound familiar? And then he goes, and this went into the last scapegoating of the 20 years. Oh, it's Nader, it's the Koch brothers, it's the Electoral College, oh, it's misogyny, oh, it's redneck deplorables. And they never look at themselves in the mirror. So it's a fantastic thing, and it's Nader just, and this is what Ralph Nader says. There are some people who think the Democratic Party can be reformed from within by changing the personnel. I say good luck to that. What's happened in the last 20 years? They've gotten entrenched. Get rid of Pelosi, you get Steny Hoyer. You get rid of Harry Reid, you get Charles Schumer. Good luck. And it ends with end of lecture. He's 83 years old, Ralph Nader. He's been in D.C. for 50 years. And this is what he was fighting, and they've just shut him out. The Democratic Party, I don't know how it can be reformed from within. I really don't. I think you need to start a completely different party. This guy's been fighting the fight for 5 decades. It's a great article, deserves your read, and it's everything that we've been talking about. Thanks for watching the show. Like and subscribe. Share the videos on your social media. The Patreon link is below. We've kind of leveled off on the Patreon. We get a little more help to help the show grow. So patreon.com/Graham Elwood. Thanks for watching.